They have the license to literally create money out of thin air. If the money supply grows faster than the country grows, then the dollars become worth less each. Hey guys, keen for your view on Renick's ideas, specifically bonds to fund income-earning government-owned assets. Aside from government changing hands, inflation, and management risk, what other factors, so aside from these factors, these risks, government changing hands, inflation, and mismanagement risk, what other factors to consider? Okay, so there's a lot there. So I've interviewed Jared Renick in the past. I consider him to be a very, very intelligent man, very, very powerful intellect. It's not often that I come away from an interview feeling like not only, oh, that person knew more than I did about this particular topic, but actually feeling like, wow, that guy had more horsepower than me, right? I was running a Turbo 4. He was running a Turbo V8, right? He's in a different class. And I came away with that feeling from him, not because he was putting me down or making me feel that. He wasn't belittling me at all, but he just has so much horsepower intellectually and so much recall of information and dates and names and everything else. And we branched across all kinds of different topics, and he was right there with me all the way through. Just remarkable. However, I think he's wrong on some things. And this is one of the areas where I do actually think that he's wrong. Now, is his idea better than what we're doing right now? Yes. Is his idea the best idea? No. So if we had an alternative, keep doing what we're doing or do what he suggests, I would say do what he suggests. It's better. But if we're reforming what we're doing now, why not go for something that's actually good rather than a halfway measure? So let's go through the comment here, because the comment here actually kind of gives us the answers here. So the risks here so the idea is the government issues bonds to fund income earning government owned assets. So bonds can work in one of two ways. Bonds can be issued for purchase in the retail market. So if you've got savings in the bank account, so war bonds, for example, were a way for the government to fund the war effort. And if you had money sitting in the bank, you would buy war bonds and you would give them your money instead, and you would hold the bond. And the bond was basically a promise from the government that they would give you back your money plus a small amount of interest in due course over time. And it was one of the ways that they tried to raise money for the war effort. Another way that a government can issue bonds is actually for them to use those bonds to pay people for their work. So you pay the contractors that are building the piece of infrastructure in bonds, or essentially just issuing cash. That's essentially what it amounts to. The government simply issues cash to cover the costs of the piece of infrastructure. Now, in theory, this can actually work a lot better than what we do at the moment. Because at the moment, the way we add new cash into the economy is through people borrowing on their houses. So when you get a loan from a bank on money for a house, that's not money that the bank had on deposit. That is money that they invented out of thin air. You come to them, you say, I own a house, I'm buying this house, it's going to be worth this much money, I need money to be able to borrow it, to be able to buy it. You know, it's $1 million house, let's say, which is just a median house in Melbourne, apparently these days. It's $1 million house, you need $900,000. They're not taking $900,000 that they had on deposit from depositors and loaning that to you. That's not how this works. How this works is that they have, under their central banking license, under their relationship with the Central Bank of Australia, the Reserve Bank of Australia, they have the license to literally create money out of thin air. So they set up a bank account and they deposit $900,000. That $900,000 didn't come from anywhere. They literally just went beep, boop, boop, and there's $900,000 that didn't exist a second ago. Now, under a fiat currency system, that's not the end of the world. But the caveat, the catch is this. If the money supply grows faster than the value of the country that the money represents, in the case of Australian money, Australia, if the money supply grows faster than the country grows, then the dollars become worth less each. Because in very simplistic terms, you can think of money as essentially the value of the country. And if you've got $1 million, but the country's worth $1 million, then each dollar is worth $1. But if you just double the money supply, now there's $2 million, but you haven't added to the value of the country, well, now the dollars are actually going to halve their value. It's not that the country becomes worth twice as much because you printed the money. No. The value of the country is the same. The value of the money will decline. So when we issue money, we have to make sure that there is an asset underneath it. Now, this is under accepted monetary theory using fiat currency. I reject fiat currency outright, but this is the system that we have. So in theory, a government issuing bonds or issuing just outright money to pay for infrastructure is an improvement on what we have right now, because they are using that money to build a piece of infrastructure that's worth something. So it increases the value of the country. So therefore it doesn't cause inflation to the same degree. It doesn't devalue the currency because the country got wealthier. We became worth more because they did something useful with that money. Now compare that to what we're doing at the moment, where we're going into debt to pay welfare payments that are being spent on cigarettes and cheap electronics. All right, we have nothing to show for that money, but the money's been created anyway. So this is why inflation is such a problem right now for us. So Renick's idea is way better than what we're doing right now. That's true. But I would actually cut to the heart of the problem, and it's contained in this question. Aside from governments changing hands, inflation, and mismanagement risk, what are the other factors to consider? Mismanagement risk is not a factor that we can dismiss lightly, because government owned is the problem here. If the government owns it, it no longer has a profit motive. You can run all the numbers you want and say, oh, yes, this is profitable. If it isn't actually just engaged in outright commerce in every direction, it will end up running inefficiently. And I know I'm rabbit holing here, but this is super important. Without price signals, you cannot make decisions. The minute the government gets involved in something and says, we'll decide how much that's worth, we'll decide how much to pay for this product, this service, for a power station, we will decide what the price of a kilowatt hour of electricity should be, whatever decisions it makes, it removes prices. And the problem is money in the form of transactions, which depend on prices, is our primary form of telling each other the truth. We lie with our words all the time. We tell the truth with our money. Money, changing hands, prices, volume of trade, how much business is being done, that is all information. That is all part of the conversation. And so unfortunately, the minute something is government owned and government run, it cannot be properly managed, because the entire reason you got the government involved is because it's not going to run on commercial terms. If it's just going to run on commercial terms and be profitable, why is the government getting involved in the first place? You don't need them. The private sector will provide. The only reason you need government ownership is if it's not going to run on commercial terms. And if it's not going to run on commercial terms, you don't have the information you need to make good decisions and to be a good manager. So unfortunately, the whole premise kind of falls apart. Now, Senator Renick is a good guy, but he's a big believer in government-owned assets, government-owned utilities, this idea that the government should provide all of these different things because they're going to do a better job than the greedy private sector. And he's right in the sense that the greedy private sector today is corporatist. They've buddied up with the government. They work with the regulators to screw over the consumers. So he's not wrong that problem exists. But everywhere in the world where utilities have been placed in the hands of the government, they have ended up basically bankrupting the country. And this happens today with countries that put them back into state hands. We're going to watch that happen with the SEC. We've seen that happen already with the NBN, by the way. Our telecommunications was privatized. Telstra was sold off. The market was somewhat deregulated. They allowed competition to come in. We had multiple different companies competing to offer us goods and services. And then they said, right, broadband, we're going to turn that back into a utility, a government-run utility. We're going to start the National Broadband Network, a government-run internet company. Well, how much has that spent? 4 times, 5 times what it was originally supposed to spend? Loses money hand over fist, and it only breaks even on paper because they've written off all of the capital cost, right? It cannot run on commercial terms. This is what happens when the government gets involved. So it's kind of a flawed question, if you get where I'm coming from, are you, Isaac? It's sort of, if we ignore the fact that it's going to go horribly wrong, could it work? Well, no, because it's going to go horribly wrong. It just is. So what's the better solution? The better solution is the nuclear option. Governments should not be issuing money. We are so used to money being issued by governments that we think it cannot be any other way. It's like if children went to school when they were 2 weeks old and they learned how to walk because they had walking lessons from a specialist walking instructor. Within 2 generations, we would forget that parents could teach their kids how to walk, right? We would think, no, a school has to do that. You need a specialist teacher to teach a kid how to walk. You think it has to be that way. We've only ever known a world where governments issue currency. This is one of the worst ways to do it. This is one of the worst ways to do it. We need to have competition in currency where you're not required to use a specific currency. You're not, it's mandated you have to use Australian dollars in Australia. Well, that shouldn't be the case. And in fact, actually, it kind of isn't the case anymore. You can use Bitcoin. You can use other, digital money, digital currencies are beginning to break up that monopoly. But for as long as we have a monopoly government issued currency, our entire economy is broken at its most fundamental level, because the thing that we are using as our means of exchange is a broken, centrally controlled thing. So the actual way to do it is the way that they did it in Canada when they first were rolling out the railways. A railway tycoon simply comes along to the Canadian government and says, hey, Canadian government, if you will give me this strip of land, 300 miles long and 2 miles wide, I promise I will build a railway straight down the middle, connecting the east and west coast or connecting whatever it is, and it won't cost you a cent. And the government goes, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. We get a railway. We don't have to pay for it. Okay, you can have this empty, remote piece of land. And what they did then was that they started a marketing campaign. And they said, hey, everybody, we're building a railway straight down the middle of this massive, long stretch of land. We are building, I think it was actually thousands of miles. I don't think it was hundreds. I think it was actually thousands of miles of railway straight down here. And if you buy one of the plots of land on either side of that railway that runs for 1 mile in either direction on either side of that railway, if you set up the signal, our train will stop for you right there in your backyard at the back of your farm. And we will transport whatever goods, whatever services, whatever people, whatever it is that you need taken to and from the town. You have a train that will show up and will stop for those goods and will take them to market and will bring you back home again. And in return, you had to buy the land. And so they sold a bunch of these plots of land, and that's the money they used to build the railway. Right? So literally what they did was they captured the increased value. The fact that there was going to be a railway running along the back of that property massively increased its value. And they captured that increase in value by selling that land to people that were going to use it for commercial purposes, i.e. farms. And then they used that capital to build the railway. That's the way it should be done, in my opinion. And it should be done without reference to government. It should be, apart from just the government agreeing that they won't interfere. Yes, you can do that. We'll stay out of the way. That's as far as you want the government to be involved. And it should be currency agnostic. It shouldn't involve the issuing of bonds. Essentially, what happens in these situations is effectively you've actually got a corporately issued bond. I won't go into the technicality of how that works, but de facto, what you've got in a financial sense is that the project itself is the bond. And it funds itself through its own increased value that it's creating and generating into the economy. If you fund your infrastructure that way, then actually every new piece of infrastructure improves the value of your dollar. It doesn't destroy it.
All right, whoa. You mean to tell me you've watched all the way to this point, an entire segment of the Oddcast, and you're still not subscribed? Seriously, what is wrong with you? Just subscribe, like, share, tell everybody. You had fun, right? Tell everybody else. Let them have some fun too. And listen, buy me some coffee, please. I'm desperate. I'm starting to get the shakes. Like, just there's a coffee. That one. Scan that coffee, please, now. Thanks.